We had two surveys. They were issued in May last year. The first was one around governance practices, which was completed by governance professionals. And the second was around future needs, and that was completed by governors, governance professionals, and chairs. So all roles and institution types were represented. We're going to start by looking at the actions that are taken to improve board diversity and inclusion practices. And what we see here is a very positive response to the need to do more to diversify our higher education boards. And this resonates with what we see and hear when we do our effectiveness review work. Many of you will already be familiar with the evidence that they're not reflective of our student and staff communities. And indeed, we're going to be publishing our next Diversity of HE Governors report next month. A point for discussion here might be that the most popular activities are ones which focus on finding the right individuals out there, rather than perhaps taking a more active role in thinking about member development and pipelines of talent from within. When it comes to board development regarding board equality, diversity and inclusion, we see that this is certainly getting on the agenda for most institutions. And given that we regularly make recommendations in this space, that feels right. Yet arguably it should be on the agenda for all institutions. And given the turnover of governors in our sector, perhaps this is an area which requires ongoing and regular attention. We asked some questions about the HE Board Diversity and Inclusion Toolkit, which we launched last year in partnership with Perrott Laver. We want to understand its use and utility so that we can continue to provide support to you. Interestingly, it's had over 1,000 unique downloads in less than a year, and the survey results show that it appears to be making a difference. Indeed, the vast majority of those who've not used the toolkit said that it was a matter of timing or that they were indeed planning to do so. So we're committed to keeping the toolkit under review, and we really welcome your feedback about how you're using it, what's most useful. We're publishing 2 supplementary resources to the toolkit based on feedback so far next month. The first will be an updated skills matrix, and the second will be some revised guidance around induction and development planning for the board. We also asked some questions about the Board Vacancies portal. This is hosted by the Committee for University Chairs on their website and is a cross-sector development. And we're currently undertaking some redevelopment work with CUC on the portal. And what we found compels us to look again at how the portal can be made use of and make a real difference to attracting and retaining diverse candidates. So clearly what we're seeing here is there is still a visibility issue, but also it has a part to play in trying to attract recruits from a more diverse range of places, and that's what we need to focus on. You'll see more of our work later this year. In fact, I suspect a number of you have taken part in focus groups recently, for which we're really grateful. So one to watch, but there's a real commitment to making sure the Board Vacancies portal plays a real useful role for you. So turning now to board remuneration, which we know of as increasing interest to the sector. We found a mixed picture here, but one which suggests a trend for considering the issue, even if it's not implemented. There are, of course, differences in Scotland, where the remuneration of a chair is required, but in England, changes to governing articles are required, and the Charity Commission also takes a view. There's still a lack of evidence that board remuneration contributes directly to improving diversity or how it affects board culture and accountability. So there's clearly more work to do here and learn from those who are early adopters in our sector. But as the burden on chairs and governors increases, we know that this is worthy of consideration, and I'll say something more about that later. We asked a set of questions about board structures and how these have changed during the pandemic. Most respondents talked about hybrid roles, and I'll come back to this. But another important development is that of the senior independent governor. We asked about it because the CUC Code of 2020 asks institutions to commit to considering that role. And what we see here is another mixed picture, even among institution type. But overall, a positive picture that the role, its advantages and disadvantages are clearly being considered. Few seem to be ruling it out completely, with most either adopting it or being assured that its functions are carried out in another way. We do know that there is some difference of view about whether it's appropriate for a vice chair who's part of the formal hierarchy of the board to be the de facto SIG, whose very purpose is to be impartial to the hierarchy. And as with remuneration, this is a topic which lends itself to further exploration. So perhaps if you have adopted it or not, lessons can be shared. We asked a set of questions about board structures and how these have changed during the pandemic. Most respondents talked about hybrid ways of working, and we'll come back to that later. But what we also found was a real degree of dynamism in board structures, and that people are using the opportunity of an effectiveness review to reflect on that. But not only that, and the range of comments here suggests that. These are some of the committees that have been added, and we notice and welcome an emphasis on people matters and academic assurance. That chimes well with what we see through our work with institutions and with staff and student well-being, and the demands of the new English regulator at the forefront of minds. Perhaps that's no surprise. Many boards that we work with are reflecting on how well their board structures can help them with assurance of these areas. We turn now to ways in which governors engage with the wider work and life of the institution. These are the most popular ways reported to us, and this again chimes with what we see in reviews. We know that there'll be huge variability, though, in the frequency, take-up and depth of these activities. And given the need to maintain the governance management boundary, but recognise the demands of academic assurance, we think finding a range of ways to enable governors to engage and understand the lived reality of the institution is right. We're often asked about ideas. And one of those actually was around reverse mentoring for students. And what we found that is definitely still unusual, but with a real appetite to consider it going forward. So if you're an institution that has a reverse mentoring scheme for students, we'd really love to hear from you so that we can explore that and share that with the sector. I'm going to turn now to meeting operations. We can see that there's a trend towards a mix of online and in-person meetings, with hybrid working a real consideration for the future. There are, however, a range of reflections cited about online meetings, which is worth bearing in mind. Do these resonate with you? Are we making sure that in adapting to a blend of meeting formats, the use of technology, we continually reflect on the advantages and disadvantages? There's a lot to take in here in terms of what actually it takes to do online meetings well, and again, to do hybrid really well. When it comes to the performance indicators that boards use, we were keen to understand how varied these were and the extent to which they enable the board to take the temperature around key aspects that its stakeholders care about, such as civic impact or staff and student well-being, as well as the more traditional measures. The picture presented showed that most boards look across a fairly typical set of measures, from student numbers and outcomes to estates, finance, staff numbers. There's then a really long tail of lesser used KPIs, which mostly encompass more detailed indicators about well-being, equality, diversity and inclusion, and impact on society. So the most well-used indicators are ones that are lagging, and there's a real lack of leading indicators. There's no question that the other aspects are hard to define and measure. Yet we know they're of real importance at institution and sector level as we continue to make the case for the value of HE. We certainly want to do further work than this. In November, we're hosting a roundtable with HEPI on the topic of how boards should measure performance, with a view to scoping a piece of research which will conclude by the end of the academic year, which learns from the thinking in other sectors, such as around ESG principles or the use of the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'm sure we'll welcome your continued input on this matter, especially when we can see that the frequency with which reporting takes place is also extremely varied. There'll be a range of factors about why this is the case and why that might be appropriate, but I think it's worth exploring in the context of what will always be a febrile operating environment. So that was a lot of information about the picture you painted of actual board practice. I'm sure much of it will have resonated with you, but perhaps also there are some surprises, and I look forward to hearing about that. I'm going to look now at the future and looking at how roles are changing and the support and development people think they need to undertake their roles. Let's start with chairs. You can see that relatively few thought that the role of the chair was not changing, which I think we would probably agree with. That said, there are a wide range of areas that were considered to be evolving. We would draw attention to some common themes here. The discussion around remuneration and the time and effort required by chairs, and the attention need to be paid to equality, diversity and inclusion, as well as financial sustainability. But managing regulatory burden is also clearly front of mind. Building on that, when we look at the confidence of governors, we think this is pretty illustrative of what we see when we undertake our effectiveness review work. We need to be clear that we're not expecting governors to be engaged as our executive teams clearly will be. But it is recognition that in fulfilling their assurance roles in a challenging environment, with assurance clearly resting with the governing body in the eyes of the regulator, there is perhaps a little bit of room for concern here. How can we ensure that governors feel confident in their roles and up to date? There may be more to do around induction and ongoing support and development, and we of course play our part in that as Advance HE. But we'll be issuing new induction and development guidance later this autumn, which we think might help with this. So please do watch out for that. Taking that one step further, there are some clear areas for support and development that governors need because they see their roles changing. We're constantly revising our governor development programme, and these areas certainly resonated with us, and particularly for pre-92 universities, a real focus on performance measurement and the regulatory landscape. Let's now look at governance professionals, of which many of you are. A wide range of ways in which the role may be changing was cited, and navigating the regulatory environment a clear forerunner across institution types. The numbers in bold show the highest and lowest scored areas. Managing relationships and membership life cycle all score highly too. The comments also highlight the increasing professionalised nature of the role and what it takes to do this job. I'll just let you have a look at this. There's a real variety here. So what are we going to do with this? How are we going to reflect on it and play our part in what we've heard? So this year, there's a range of things that we will attempt to do to support you on all of these matters. The first is we'll continue to have a focus on board diversity and inclusion and the assurance of equality, diversity and inclusion. As I said earlier, we're planning to publish the Diversity of Governors report next month. That'll be the second time we've done that. We're planning to publish an updated skills matrix and induction guidance. And in the early part of 2023, we're going to be launching a member benefit for our members, which is a supporting inclusive board community for governance professionals. Now, we trialled this with Guild HE last year for small and specialist providers, and it was really successful. We've had some really good feedback, and this is designed to really help governance professionals reflect on confidence and their thinking in this area to help drive change. The other area clearly that needs attention is academic assurance, performance, and the regulatory environment. We are currently working with Universities UK and Guild HE to scope out what some sector support in that space, specifically for England, I think, given the particular challenges there, though it will have wider resonance. We're looking to scope what that work should look like, and you'll hear more about that soon. But I think also to say that our Governor Development Programme events also are making sure that they focus on this as a topic. We also picked up quite a bit about relationships in the feedback that we've seen. So we have a Governor Development Programme event for chairs called Leading the Board, and we're extending that to a full day this year. And also we're learning from an event, a programme that we run, which is for new VCs in transition. And we are making sure that there is some complementarity between those two programmes when it comes to understanding the importance of the relationships between chairs and executives. We also asked a set of questions which we haven't gone into in depth here today, which is around the appetite and interest for things like e-learning, micro-credentials and accreditation. I think it's safe to say that we had some really nuanced feedback from different people in different roles, but also reflecting a whole range of factors and issues about why or not some of these things may be of interest. So we're going to spend some time thinking that through and talking to the sector and sector partners about how some of that might be best taken forward. One thing that you will see, hopefully this week or next, is some work that we've been doing around a map, an online tool for governors and governance professionals, where we have mapped out the resources and support available for governors and governance professionals to support them in their role. We've designed this as an online map based on knowledge, behaviours and values and skills as 3 key competency areas. And you'll have it online and able to play with it in the next week or so. And again, we hope that that will help with matters to do with induction, training and development. So just to conclude this section then, some areas to watch for us all: academic assurance, EDI responsibilities, board diversity, performance oversight, board insights and exposure, and transparency. But I did also want to say some areas to celebrate. Navigating the pandemic has clearly been a huge learning curve for us all, and we can see that that learning is being taken forward into the ways that we're going to work next. Keeping up with regulatory demands, need I say more? The commitment of board members to the sector was palpable. There has been a huge emphasis on students, and that continues to grow, and the appetite among board members for understanding the student experience is really, really palpable, and it's also noted by students themselves. The change of pace and determination to tackle board diversity and inclusion Certainly, we're proud to support that work and we will continue to do so, but we really sense that it's high on your agenda too. And the appetite for learning from other experiences. So that concludes this part of the presentation and gives us, I think, plenty of food for thought.